Good morning. Let's all have a seat. Thank you. Good. So welcome everyone to the Global Resilience Hub for our event entitled From Risk to Reward, the Business Imperative for Financing Climate Adaptation and Resilience. My name is Kahir Dhanani. I'm a managing director and partner at BCG based in Washington, D.C. And to start us off, I'm going to invite the USAID Chief Climate Officer, Gillian Caldwell, to share some opening remarks.
So just out of curiosity, who do we have in the room here? How many people from investment funds? Okay. How many people from companies trying to do the right thing? How many people from NGOs? Okay. And how many from think tanks? Just one. All right. All right. Well, thank you all so much for coming. Just a day ago, was it? I don't know. Time flies here when you're having fun at COP. 2 days ago, Administrator Power and our Special Envoy for Climate, John Kerry, announced some exciting news, which is that for our Prepare call to action, we were able to mobilize a further $2.6 billion in investments from a range of companies around the world. I see Danone is here, for example, and so many others. That was on top of the $600 million that we were able to mobilize in the first year of the call to action. So what we're starting to see is that companies are stepping up and responding to the reality that our climate is changing and that we have to take action to address the consequences. Companies are beginning to know and understand, as this very important report by BCG demonstrates, that if you take action early, you can actually save up to 15 times the amount you expend to protect your value chains and your employees and your assets overseas. So this groundbreaking new report, which we're going to be hearing about today, I think is such an important contribution to the conversation because for so long we have been told that there is no business case for adaptation. And in fact, companies have been believing that meme. Right, in terms of private sector investments in climate finance, less than 2% is going to adaptation. So a study that actually analyzes thousands of reports and debunks the myth that there is nothing to be gained from adaptation-related investments is a critically important contribution to the debate. And I really want to thank and acknowledge BCG for taking that step, for joining our Prepare call to action, and for investing their own time, money, and resource in producing today's report. There's a QR code up there, and I really commend it to you. It's great reading for your plane ride home. What else did I want to tell you? I think that's it because BCG is really going to be able to talk in some pretty intimate detail about what's happening. But I want to make sure that I acknowledge the many people at BCG that collaborated so closely with Lindsay Doyle and USAID's team in getting us to where we are today. That would be Trish Stroman, Charmaine Keynes, Kahir Dhanani, Veronica Chow, Becca Gibbs, and the team much more broadly. Really deeply appreciative of your support, and I hope your report, which soundly debunks the mythology, really makes a difference and starts catalyzing the critically necessary flow of finance we need towards adaptation. The last thing I'll say is that this is a perfect example of a place where what's good for business is also good for the communities that you're working and living in. These companies that are taking action realize that if the farmers they depend on can't produce crops, the companies they're running can't produce profits. So it's a win-win situation to invest in the people that support and advance your own work. And thank you so much to all of you who recognize that and are making related investments. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Gillian. It's great to have you here and to have all of you here as well. So our plan for this session is as follows. I'll spend about 5 minutes talking about our report and sharing some of the key insights with all of you. We'll then turn to a panel, which my dear friend Veronica will lead. She's over there. And we've got some amazing speakers to join her on the panel and to get into some of the depth of this topic. And then we'll invite Nate to make some closing remarks and to summarize us. So let me begin by saying that, many of you were here a few days ago when we launched this report at the U.S. Center with Secretary Kerry and Administrator Power. We were really delighted that they were able to be there, and they really demonstrated and spoke to the importance of climate adaptation and resilience and the investment there. So we used that occasion to launch the report, and our hope is that this report does exactly what Gillian said, is to debunk the myth. So I'd like to say thank you to you, Gillian, to Lindsay, to Pallavi, to Anne from USAID and State Department, to Christina Chan, who's not here with us from State Department, and to Nate for your partnership on this. It's been really, really wonderful working with all of you on getting this done. And you already named our team, so I don't have to do that. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so as I said, the singular goal for this report is to demystify the business case for companies to finance adaptation and resilience measures, both internally within their companies and then externally with the communities around which they live. So the aim is to change that narrative, as Gillian was saying. So instead of telling companies that they need to step up to meet the A&R needs in developing countries and globally, we wanted to show that there is both an imperative and an opportunity there. So this work is a result of painstakingly going through detailed transactions across the world, talking to many companies, looking at hundreds of companies and their case studies of what they've been doing, and then bringing all those insights together into the framework. And our framework has 3 components to it. It has protect, grow, and participate. And along all of this is a cross-cutting call to action for mobilizing the private sector. So let me go through each of these 3 elements really quickly. So first, protect. The imperative here is for companies to finance measures that protect assets, supply chains, and operations. This is about looking internally. What will happen to our business if we do nothing? So we found that not only does protecting the value at risk result in substantial economic benefit, it also creates positive knock-on benefits for the communities around which companies are operating. And in fact, those companies rely on those communities and those ecosystems for the perpetuation of their business. So we found that there's a real clear benefit for this. The second element is grow. So the opportunity here is to invest in the burgeoning market of A&R solutions, not just those early stage solutions in startups, and we'll hear from some of the startups here today, but also from late stage and mature organizations and companies that are doing these things internally and within their operations. And we know that we show that there is a pipeline of investment opportunities across resilience themes such as food, energy, water, and health. And these are actually delivering high valuations, particularly, which was interesting for us, particularly in emerging markets and developing economies. Finally, participate. It's really important to recognize that we need to work together on this agenda. It's not just that companies should do it alone or government should do it alone. Government and companies should come together. And we found that a number of interesting examples of corporations partnering up with government on government-led or public sector-led A&R measures, which then actually support the communities and are beneficial for their business. So this gives you a bit of a sense of our framework. So let me now turn to some of the key messages that I'd love for all of you to take away. And there's 4 of those messages. So one, which we've said a number of times, so I'll say it one more time, is that contrary to the perception that the business case is lacking or that opportunities exist only for a few sectors, our analysis found and surfaced a wide array of investment opportunities in adaptation and resilience across food, water, health, and more. 2, where previously the private sector did not know how to approach adaptation and resilience, our analysis shows that the levers to build resilience are increasingly clear. So we're showing companies that your peers are doing these things, and we've laid those out very clearly, and you'll hear some of those examples from some of the companies on the panel that Veronica will share shortly. So we show that range, and it's really interesting to show that there is opportunity there. 3, adaptation and resilience investment is a win for the private sector, particularly in emerging markets and developing economies. So that win, how do we calculate it? We calculate it very clearly. So, and Secretary Kerry actually mentioned these numbers, which we're really glad to hear him say. So for every dollar that a company invests in implementing adaptation resilience measures, it yields between $2 and $15 of financial benefits from avoided losses. And this is a paradigm shift for companies. It's not to think about ROI as I put in some money, I get some money back. It's about I put in some money and I avoid a loss, a massive loss. And so that shift in paradigm is really, really critical around avoided losses. The second is that companies who invest in adaptation solutions are earning a median valuation multiple of 9 times. And we chose the median because it can go very, very wide, including at the highest end, 77 times in some of what we saw. And this is one of the things that Secretary Kerry said, and we wanted to add a bit of nuance to that. It's the median is 9, okay? And then number 4, much of that impact happens at the intersection of public and private action. So what we're seeing is that the public and social sectors are increasingly stepping up and catalyzing investment, providing concessional finance and the enabling environment to spur that investment, and that these partnerships are value-adding. So those are the key messages I want you to take away from this. I'm going to turn it over to Veronica to now invite our panelists on stage up here to share their views. And I would say that the QR code is over there. It's on every slide. So please do look at it, read the report, or at least the executive summary. I think it does show some interesting things. Thank you, everyone.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kahir, for that great overview. So let's get into the panel. We have a fabulous group of speakers. I'll invite them up one at a time to come join us here. So we have Dr. Folayinka Danya, who is the Chief Resilience Officer of Lagos State. Joining her is Chris Adamo, who is the Vice President of Public Affairs and Regenerative Agriculture at Danone. We have Gail Schuler, who is Senior Vice President and Chief Sustainability Officer for 3M. Craig Kogut, who is founder and co-managing partner at Pegasus Capital. Robert Bartrup, who is Chief Revenue Officer of Source. And Gillian Cadwell, who is the Chief Climate Officer at USAID. Oh, yes, and Michael. Sorry. From McCormick. Please join the page. Please come join us. Thank you. Michael secured his Blue Zone pass just in time to join us today. So we are delighted to have you all here with us. Fantastic. So I will just move over here, or maybe I'll just stay up here actually for posing the questions. All right, well, maybe Dr. Danya, we are going to start with you, because Lagos has been doing some really exciting investments in adaptation and resilience. So can you just share a little bit more about your experiences of unlocking private finance for the very ambitious ANR investments you're making in Lagos?
Thank you very much. So to put it in perspective, Lagos State is a coastal state in Nigeria, that's in West Africa. We are a very small state, about 3,557 square kilometers with a population of over 25 million people, which is estimated. And then the main climate impact drivers for us are extreme rainfall, extreme heat, and sea level rise. And we believe that if we do nothing about this, we've done assessments over time and we related that the cost of inaction for us will be about $39 billion. But the cost of action for us will be just about $9 billion. So when you look at it, you see that that is a lot. $39 billion for us is more than 14 times our annual budget. But if we do nothing, 165 square kilometers of the land in Lagos will be inundated by water. Over 2 million people will lose their livelihoods. We have about 700,000 people, 50% of which are vulnerable, that will have to be relocated at a cost of about $6 billion. We would have about $5 billion worth of damage to infrastructure, roads, power, communications. So we cannot afford to do nothing. But we can't afford to do it on our own. So unlocking private capital is very, very important for us. And we've been successful with this over the years. We have our Blue Line, which is our own metro, which was recently launched. It's the first intra-city metro line in Nigeria, and we're doing that via a PPP model with the China Civil Engineering Construction Company. We're in the process of securing about over 400 million euros from AFD to improve our water transportation system and make it more climate resilient. We recently raised over 100 billion naira, that is over $120 million for infrastructure projects around roads, schools, and hospitals. And this, our bond, which we launched this year, was seriously oversubscribed. So the private sector also understands that we cannot do this without them. And all of us will be affected one way or the other. Where do we put 25 million people? I don't know if your countries can accommodate us. I think that would be excellent, but we would rather not. So it has been a great experience for us. The private sector is always willing to work with us, but there's still a lot that needs to be done. We're looking for over $9 billion. That is a lot. There have been some challenges doing this. And one of the major challenges we've had is how do we make high social impact projects bankable? That has been a huge challenge for us because a lot of companies look at ROI, just as you said, as more important than the costs that will be avoided. And how do we change the narrative to make it more important for people to also consider that as some sort of return on investment? And that has been the challenge for us. But all in all, we've been successful at unlocking private capital. We're always looking for more. So this is me also asking for more. We have a lot of adaptation and resilience pipeline projects currently available. In fact, we recently launched the Lagos State Climate Adaptation and Resilience Plan. And from the projects that we have there, at least we've identified about 14 that are bankable. And based on conversations that we've had with financiers and investors, there are two kinds of projects that we realized that a lot of them are interested in, which are projects around waste to energy and projects around sewage treatments, because there's willingness to pay for this. But we're always willing to accommodate more private capital, as in we're open for discussion. So please, you can approach me if there's anyone. This is me pitching. As in, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dania. And I think you phrased it so well. How do we unlock capital for projects that truly have that social impact? Chris, maybe I'll bring you in here from Danone. Danone has been at the forefront of leading a number of these types of projects that create value both for your company but also for communities. Can you share more about how your company thinks about financing these projects?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me here. And for those of you who don't know Danone, we're a multinational large food company. So dairy is our number one commodity, our number one ingredient we buy. We also have other important commodities. And I'm just going to name a couple because for me, this is about agriculture. This is about the production of these ingredients that are absolutely key to us. And each ingredient, each farm system, each location that they exist in, the investment's going to look a little different, right? There's certainly some commonalities and overlap, but there's location matters, right? And the system matters. So for us, let's just take dairy, right? Cows do not produce milk as well in hot weather, right? So, and we also, to the extent that we can, when you buy one of our yogurts or one of our fresh milk products, most often, not everywhere, but most often, we want that milk to be local. It does not make a lot of economic sense to be transporting milk long distances. Even in the United States, a big market, you buy a yogurt in the East Coast, hopefully that milk came somewhere nearby. We try to the extent to do that. So location matters, commodity matters. And for us, that capital, and I love it because I'm the sustainability guy here talking about financing. Our company loves that. But I make that point only because this is not a philanthropic effort for us. This is a business decision. This is bottom line's arguments, and it gets into our annual budgets. It gets into our strategy plans that look out 1, 2, 3 years. And that's super critical because if this was just philanthropy, we'd be having, 100,000 here, 500,000 there, $1 million there. No, this is annual budgets in our local regions of the world. So what that means is, it's not, for those of you who are in government, and I used to be in government, there is that annual argument, right? You have to make the justifications. What are we going to do? What's the ROI on it? But think about that. So we have to build that into our procurement budget. The folks that are buying these commodities have to make those arguments for why it's good for their buying. So again, go back to the farm system, go back to the dairy. Take places like North Africa, where we have big businesses and we have a lot of work to do in resilience. Morocco, Algeria, Egypt, Nigeria. These are places where we're dealing with thousands of smallholder farms in most cases. These farms need help in a number of ways. It can be technical assistance that we're investing in, education, training. It can be equipment. A lot of folks don't realize this. We talk about regenerative agriculture. What does that mean? They need better equipment all over the world, this is not unique to North Africa or West Africa, for cover crops, for tillage, for genetics on seed. So these are the types of investments we're making. And then with milk, it could be the delivery, right? We want to help these folks to put their milk into a storage deposit so they don't have to go as far. investing in that infrastructure for the milk delivery is absolutely critical for us. It's often better milk. We can get better quality, cheaper, and help those farms get higher yields. These are all so what is the investment? And this is coming out of our bottom line budgets, but we have to make the argument, what is it going towards? And then I'll just end real quickly, because we can do this all day, and we're going to spend millions and millions and millions all over the world doing it, which is fantastic, but we can do it better and scale with public partnerships, or with, in the other cases, some private partnerships, which we're just starting to unlock right now. So it's still an evolution about how we're blending it all together at the end of the day.
Yeah, and what I love about that example is even within one sector, there's such a variety of opportunities to finance and invest. Maybe Gail, at 3M, in terms of diversity of solutions, 3M's been leading on resilient building materials, grid resilient solutions, water resilient solutions. So can you just speak to that range of opportunities for financing?
Sure. So at 3M, you may know us for Post-it notes. Hopefully you're starting to know us more for the solutions that we provide around electronics, or around electrifying transportation, or around renewable energy, some of those spaces, or, as you mentioned, the building modernization. These are great opportunities that we're investing in, not just in terms of partnership or philanthropy, as was mentioned by Danone, but also in terms of new product evolution. And how do we partner to find those right solutions that people are going to need to bring forward for resiliency of the future? So for every new product we launch, we have a requirement that everything must have a sustainability value commitment. That means we've benchmarked what the current offerings are and how we can advance it, how we can make a solution that is more resilient, helps mitigate the risk, whether it's from a circular economy perspective or a climate challenge. So those are things that we work on. We learned a long time ago, in 1975, we brought forward a program that was about how to reduce our impact as a company. And since 2002, we've reduced our own emissions more than 78%, 38% since 2019. We're committed on doing those things, but we know that we do more when we work together. So whether that's with Indigenous groups in Canada, working on how to better harvest wood for Post-it notes and other products, or with communities in India about how to engage solar panel installation to help people be able to get to their workplace or get to school and advance the future for our workforce and our customers. It's a really important piece, and I think we need to look at it very cohesively and find that there are both solutions to invest in and create business opportunities, so they grow piece, as well as pieces along how we can better engage communities. And we're doing a lot on that.
Fantastic. And Michael, maybe that's a perfect way to bring you into this, because engaging communities is at the heart of many of McCormick's sustainability efforts underway. Could you share a little bit more about some of those and how finance fits into them?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And apologize for getting in late. I've been running from one event to another. That's a really good thing. So I'm glad to be here and with this esteemed panel, and my good friend Gail is over there. So McCormick and Company. Most of you know McCormick differently. I know Gail uses a lot of our products, so that's one. McCormick is the king of herbs and spices. It's the only name that you can take with quality and confidence around the globe. In our own case, this is a company that is 134 years old. So the real issue for us, the reason why we believe in resilience and in really addressing this climate challenge that we face, is because of our supply chain. So it's a better business case for us than anybody knows, because to create an enduring supply chain that will go another 134 years, you need a resilient community. To put it in perspective, because of that, we created our strategy, which we call purpose-led performance, which is simply, we're a growth company, so we're committed to delivering top-tier financial performance while doing the right thing for people, for communities, and the planet we all share. This is a foundational strategy for us. And you're right, from Danone, the era of philanthropy is actually challenged. In fact, we believe that the era of corporate social responsibility is over. You have to embed it in your business. So everything we do, every business unit has this embedded. And so what is important is when we talk about communities, we source from over 80 different countries around the globe. vanilla from Madagascar, black pepper from Vietnam, oregano from Turkey, red pepper from India, all over. I can go on and on. So the importance for us of creating healthy communities in those farming communities is critical. And we recognize that agriculture has to do its own portion for us to have a decarbonized world. You're never going to get to net zero if you don't treat mom and pop operations very well. So in our strategy, we say we're going to make impact in communities where we live, communities where we work, but most importantly, communities where we source. Those are the farming communities that are vulnerable. Now, those over 80 different countries have one thing in common, only one. They are in the global south, and they are more vulnerable to this climate change, and they didn't cause it. So for us, it's a matter of building the right thing. So here's what we're doing on those. We have a strategy we call building community resilience. So we've created a framework, the first of its kind in our industry. Is called Grown for Good. What does that mean? That means, and when I talk about farm level certification, everybody thinks I'm talking about just the farm level. No. In addition to farm level, and by the way, RFA is our partner, Rainforest Alliance is our partner, but that's just for farm level certification. In addition, we have 1, community resilience, 2, women empowerment, 3, ethical supply chain. Let me start with the women empowerment, because it's easy to make this academic. We live in those worlds. And I'm not the type of chief sustainability officer that would just stay in the average tower. I go into the farms to see what is happening, to understand it, to address the right issues on those. I'll give you one example. Madagascar. I don't know if you know that Madagascar produces over 80% of the world natural vanilla. And I mean the real natural vanilla, not the chemical stuff that kill you. I'm talking about the real stuff. So when you buy McCormick, we source exclusively from there. You know what you are buying. So we're trying to create a women's, they can own their own farms. But guess what? We did all this strategy. I go down there, they said, but we don't have money. We don't have capital to start our own farms. You know what we did? We created a village savings and loan. And lo and behold, USAID heard it and came to partner with us to co-fund it. So when you're doing the right thing, you can bring a lot of people together. So this village savings and loan, you know what McCormick did? We paid the interest upfront. So these women, and by the way, and some men, took the money, started their own businesses, and we committed to buying it at a premium. That's one thing. Today, these communities in Andapa region, in Sava region, in Moa Setra region, they are thriving because of that singular act. And they are not asking for handout. There is a mistake that people think these farmers are asking for handout. They are not. By the way, I grew up on a farm, eastern part of Nigeria. My mom was a farmer. And you can see my passion around women empowerment. My mom was a farmer that made enough money to send 4 children to private school, Catholic boarding school, and that changed the trajectory of my life. So I don't want this to be an exception. I want to be the real thing. So that's why we're empowering women in both Vietnam, in Indonesia. There is a lady I like to tell her story. Her story is Caroliana. When I met her, I was touching. She had nothing to do. She started to make a nursery for cinnamon. All our cinnamon, 100% comes from Indonesia. And today, she's a women leader, galvanizing women in the village to own their own business, and they are thriving. That's what I mean by resilience. And if you're going to decarbonize the planet, you better take these farmers along. That's exactly what we're doing. Thank you very much.
Fantastic, fantastic. Really, what I love about these first remarks is we hear from cities, large companies about the things that they are financing and why. But let's bring in the capital side of things. Let's hear about how investors perceive it. So, Craig, maybe I'll pull you in here from Pegasus.
Well, we may not be a typical investor because we're in the first prepare call to action. And I believe, by the way, any investor, or at least in most sectors today, is first of all a climate investor, whether they know it or not, to pick up what Michael was saying. And secondly, they're probably a resilience investor. But with that, there are things we can't do. We can't invest in a seawall, let's say, but we can, with help from some amazing insurance folks in this room, by the way, who've done great reporting, we can make a case to a government that they should put in a seawall to facilitate business development, to let us put capital into resilient water, resilient renewables, and the like. We have 2 funds sponsored by the Green Climate Fund. One is a land-based fund, one is a coral reef fund. Even one is a mitigation fund. Everything we do is we have to have resilience as well. So if we're doing solar, it's with storage. And we're about to do the first solar with storage project in the Dominican Republic. We're doing something in Senegal, as an example, where very much the public-private partnership, the Senegal harbor in Dakar, the fish are thrown into reefers. Food security is absolutely critical. So we're going to build the first 2 cold storage facilities in the port. We need government help. It's going back to public-private partnership, but we also need some U.S. aid, UNDP type contributions, and USAID has been very good, including with the Food Security Accelerator, which we're involved with. So the case is compelling, and also corporate offtake can matter. So a big part of our investing will be to anchor, actually, as I'm looking around, 2 of the folks on that side we're actually in discussions with. Around various projects with the world. That corporate offtake provides something. We also have a core refund, which is totally focused on resilience. There, too, we need governments. We're working on a major plastic project in Indonesia, Maldives, et cetera. We need government help. We need corporate offtake. But then it's very much about community relations. The economics can be fabulous in all these projects, I'd say. Again, some things don't work, but if you focus on the need, there is so much opportunity, and I thank BCG for highlighting that. And again, I don't think you can be a climate investor without focusing on resilience.
Fantastic, fantastic. And Rob, these notion of community, private sector, government coming together, like that's at the heart of Source's business model. Could you share a little bit more about how Source thinks about these questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So at Source, we make clean drinking water that is 100% renewable. So when we look at water stress globally, there's the resource side, so changing climate, water scarcity. Our technology is able to harvest water from the atmosphere, which is an abundant, renewable, constantly replenishing source of fresh water. And then when we look at the infrastructure problems related to water and the access problems, it's an infrastructure problem. So our technology is able to leapfrog that infrastructure problem and make water where you need it, which is very similar to the way that's happened in renewable energy and mobile telephone technology. So when you get to water problems, you pretty quickly get to SID. So you look at who's on the front line of climate, who's on the front line of access problems. You get to small islands, and in the Pacific Islands in particular are about 40% access level. I think it's more than half of the population doesn't have access to clean water. And that half is the non-urban half, so it's also on the front lines of the variety of climate challenges they're having. So their vulnerability and the suitability is high for a technology like ours. We took that to Papua New Guinea, which is one of the largest population in that region. And we sat down with them and said, like, what's your plan to get to your access goals? And they said, we don't have a plan because there's no technical solution to the abundance of villages and islands that we're trying to serve. And they said, worse than that, it's not just a water problem, it's a human problem. So our education rates for women are significantly lower in those areas, our life expectancy, our vulnerability to climate, and our plastic waste. So they've got a whole bunch of themes that not only are problems, but it's not a funding problem. They just don't have the technical solution. So with the support from the US government, the US State Department, and the Nordic Development Fund, we're very proud in the last year to deliver our first 2 projects in Papua New Guinea. One of them on an island, which is very representative of the problem that I'm describing. And that island was done in partnership with many of the involved organisations. So to your question, we sat down with the Department of Education and they said, hey, we've got to bring in the Department of Climate Change, Department of Local Government, community groups, school principals, teachers. We've got to get everyone involved and figure out how to do this. The day that we launched that in November, that project, we also signed an agreement with the Department of Education to expand that to 750 schools, which is 240,000 students. So that's an enormous percentage. It's a big double-digit percentage of students in Papua New Guinea that are now actively involved in accessing renewable water technology. And to do that, to your point, we need to figure out how to do that. So the private sector's got to be involved. So we've got some support for that project, and that needs to be catalytic support. So the private sector needs to make sure, in our case, the technology's got to work. We've got to build the capability and local people to install and train it, and we've got to educate, and we've got to scale up around that. The government's got to be involved. They've got to lead. They've got to make sure that they're communicating with communities, finding locations, educating and scaling. And then we're also working with multilaterals and other funding agencies to make sure that every dollar that goes into that comes up with 10x impact or more as it relates to a variety of economic and social outcomes. So really, really thrilled to have been able to do that. And I think the one takeaway would be you've got to involve all of the people from day one who are required to scale. And you've got to give them the roles and make them accountable for the piece of the pie that they can control. And so I think that teamwork, but also accountability from different functions and the funders or the catalytic investors are the ones that need to try to promote that so that long-term these models and these opportunities can thrive without the involvement of government. It's something where the private sector can fund and expand themselves.
Fantastic. Gillian, just about every speaker that preceded you mentioned in some way the criticality of governments, in particular bilaterals, in helping to get things going, get private sector finance flowing. Ultimately, might not be in it for the long term, but at least to get things going. So can you just speak more to how you see the role of bilaterals and in particular some of the things USAID is doing to mobilize private sector finance?
Hello? Okay. USAID has really sort of tried to grab the bull by the horns when it comes to the climate crisis because it imperils everything we've ever achieved or would hope to achieve. Education, democracy, our humanitarian assistance, our economic development programming, our health programming. I mean, there's not a single area of programming that we engage in that is not threatened by the cascading impacts of the climate crisis. And that is why President Biden called on all federal agencies to become climate agencies and why USAID answered that call to action with a climate strategy that takes us through 2030. And we have a series of very ambitious goals that we've established for ourselves, including reducing carbon emissions by 6 billion tons. That's 2.5 times all U.S. emissions in 2021. Protecting and preserving 100 million hectares of carbon-critical landscape, increasing the adaptation and resilience of 500 million people worldwide through President Biden's Prepare initiative. That's what we're talking about today. Catalyzing $150 billion in public and private finance. That's also why we're here today. The U.S. government invested about $9.3 billion in 2023 in climate-related finance. And we're making our way towards the $11 billion that President Biden committed in 2024. But it's still a drop in the bucket. Even the $150 billion, which is a stretch assignment for USAID, is nowhere near the trillions that we're going to need. And that's why we're spending so much time talking about the private sector. And I think there are some that have criticized the U.S. government for kind of overplaying the role of the private sector in this context. And you could legitimately be concerned that we're using public dollars to underwrite private profits. But in fact, we're not doing that. What we are doing is avoiding displacing private capital, right? In places where private capital is lucrative and those investments are being made, for example, renewable energy, where the costs have plummeted, and we're seeing, I mean, the only good news in the climate context today is the acceleration of renewable energy, which is really exceeding expectations. But in other areas, there is a need to have some government assistance in that concessional capital and in providing those guarantees to bring the private sector to the table. And it makes economic sense for the government to make those investments because we can't afford to yield $1 from every dollar we invest. We need $5 or $10 or $25 from every dollar we invest because we have so few dollars. We just announced 7 company recipients under our Climate Finance Development Accelerator. We have something called an Adaptation Finance Window. Those are companies from Cote d'Ivoire and Kenya and Malawi and Mozambique, working in areas like water storage efficiency, parametric insurance. That might not be a term that's familiar to you, but it's the kind of insurance that pays out to large groups of people who don't need to submit individual claims on the basis of documented weather-based events, which can be, of course, so catastrophic to smallholder farmers. And just by way of example, when I talk about the need for multiples on our investment, the $2.7 million we invested in one of those companies that is providing parametric insurance catalyzed $18 million in investment for these smallholder farmers that need it, reaching 1 million people in the catchment area. And excitingly, we have a new adaptation finance window we just launched with our collaborators. You mentioned bilateral partners, both Denmark and Sweden, and of course, the U.S. government's own International Development Finance Corporation. We're able to offer, especially through Denmark and Sweden's contribution, guarantees of up to $100 million. And we're inviting in this next round fund managers and investors, right? Not the companies themselves, but the fund managers and investors. And our research indicates that there's at least $3.5 billion in fund managers investing now in adaptation, right? Starting to make the moves, which of course we hope BCG's report is going to accelerate even more. So that adaptation finance window is open, very much encouraging fund managers to consider applying for that. And also wanted to invite all of the investors in the room and online to join our Climate Finance Investment Network, which we launched just a year ago. It has over 800 investors from more than 100 countries worldwide, and that's the best way to hear about our calls for proposals and where and how we can help and support you to make the difference we all need to. So yeah, in closing, thank you again to BCG and especially to the Resilience Partnership that has been such a great partner for us with the Prepare Call to Action. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Gillian, and please join me in thanking the panel for those really illuminating points. To close it out then, I will pass it over to Nate on behalf of the Resilience Partnership.
Thank you so much. And yes, I know there's been a lot of thank yous, but I also want to thank BCG, USAID, the Office for the Special Presidential Envoy for Climate for being such amazing partners in this report and in many things. So GRP has been working in this space for 10 years, and it felt quite lonely a while ago. I know there's many familiar faces in this room who also felt that, but it now really feels like there's momentum with us. And I think this report just exemplifies that momentum and also really critically demonstrates the opportunity, the strength, and the imperative, which I think is such a key word in this for investing in and getting business involvement in adaptation and resilience. We know that without adaptation and resilience being in lockstep with mitigation, we will completely derail our mitigation efforts. And that is so apparent today because of what we're facing from the climate at present. And I think the panel has done just an amazing job also of demonstrating the connection points in adaptation and resilience through innovation from 3M, through agriculture from Danone and McCormick and Company, through the cities, which is so key here as well, and people as well. I mean, I feel like adaptation and resilience is really that connection point with people within the climate discussion, and really everything. And so I think we've seen some fantastic highlights of the role of public-private partnerships here in de-risking, and just the recognition that we don't have a lot of money, and we don't have a lot of time. And so the only way to solve this is to ensure that every single dollar, every single resource, every single minute that we invest in this is leveraged to the maximum. And again, this report is such a key demonstration of that and the opportunity here for businesses and for everyone. And the last, just wrapping things up, but just a couple things that stood out for me is Mike's quote about doing the right thing, you can bring a lot of people together. And I think this is also a really good demonstration of that. And Craig's point of, you can't be a climate investor without focusing on resilience is another really, really key point for me. So I mentioned this in a previous panel, what feels like about 60 days ago, but I think it was 2 or 3, and I'm sure you're all feeling that as well. But resilience, one of the reasons why it's complicated is because it's about dealing with systems. But we can't let ourselves get stuck in that complexity. We have to embrace it. We have to really use the technology, the partnerships from the public and the private sector, the diversity of knowledge from local knowledge through to business knowledge and all of that to help us navigate it and embrace it. And that's the only way we're going to solve this climate crisis. So thank you very much.